Okay, I see a lot of people here. That's a good thing, I think. Is everybody in that's wanted to be in? It looks like it. Well, welcome to everybody who has joined the fingerpicking, my top fingerpicking songs world. This is kind of a really fun project to put together, and although it took me a lot longer than I thought, it's like I thought, oh, I should be able to whip that out and pick these songs pretty quickly, and it just dragged on because I kept also getting caught up doing a strumming one and different things, the classical one, but it's now. I'm really happy that so many people liked it, so that's good. Anybody that's out there, if you want to raise your hand, if you ever have a question, I think you just got to raise your hand, especially if you're muted. If you raise your hand like this, a little thing will come up like Keith just did, except he's not muted. Oh, yeah. So feel free to interrupt me. Oh, there we go. Okay, now I get the message that Keith had a question, and then. I guess we can, one of the hosts, who are Keith and Jamila, will be able to let you ask your question. So, but otherwise, I will kind of get started with my approach to If You Could Read My Mind, which is Gordon Lightfoot plays this with a lot of variety at different times. And what I try to do is make it a little more consistent. But I wrote out 4 pages of tablature, and I hate it when like my lesson on the boxer has 6 pages of tab, which is like note for note what Paul Simon did the one time they on the studio recording, and every time he would play it, it would end up being a little bit different. So it's when I have people work on something like the boxer, I kind of want them to just look through the whole thing and just make sure that you could do every measure in there, but you don't have to do them in that order. Like what he does in the second verse might be a little different than the first, and it's kind of the same with this. So my 4 pages of tab, there are probably about 5 important measures in there that have something unique in it. And one of them, the very first thing that people have to be able to do to play this accurately is this what I call a 3-3-2 finger picking pattern. Hopefully everybody out there is familiar with arpeggios like in House of the Rising Sun. That type of thing. Arpeggio basically means one note at a time, but usually of the same chord. And that's what I would just call an up and down arpeggio, where you're just playing, we're going from the lowest note up to the highest and back with a string of 6 notes. So for House of the Rising Sun, Time in a Bottle, Hallelujah, those are all ones that use the same pattern of 6 notes in a measure. Etc. That's the progression to Hallelujah. The next thing people have to be able to do is the landslide pattern, where you're just playing notes in between, where you're keeping a steady alternating bass going, and then playing just a finger in between each one. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. What I'm doing is playing my index finger after the first bass note, my middle finger after the second bass note, and my index finger again after the third bass note. So that's like the first pattern people should learn for alternate bass songs, which stretches out eventually into the Boxer and Streets of London and Pancho and Lefty, all kinds of tunes. But what we have in If You Could Read My Mind is something that does show up in a lot of Jim Croce songs, because it's a pattern he used a lot. But it's a pattern where it's an 8th note. It's 8 notes in the pattern, and it's in 2 groups of 3 and a group of 2. And so if you just play a G chord, and especially for If You Could Read My Mind, you only need one finger on these G chords, because we're only playing the middle strings. What I call the middle strings on the guitar is the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th strings, as opposed to the top strings, which would be the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd strings. So on this G chord, all those notes are open. So we're just going to be hitting. Your thumb will play the 6th and 4th string and 5th string at times, depending on what chord we're on. And then your index finger is going to play the 3rd string, and your middle finger is going to play the 2nd string. So this pattern is 8 notes. Thumb, index, middle. That's the first 3. That's the first set of 3 of what I'm calling 3-3-2. And it's because we're going to have another set of 3, starting with the 4th string this time. So there's my first 6 notes in this pattern. Thumb, index, middle, alternate thumb, index, middle. Now I have room for two more because this song's in 4/4 time, so I have to play two more notes. I'm going to hit the fourth string again and the third string again. So the whole pattern, everybody could be trying this with a guitar, or maybe a lot of you probably already have the hang of this. So you know, this might be easy for some of you, and for others it might be new. A little slower. Thumb, index, middle, thumb, index, middle, oops, thumb, index. Sometimes that third thumb will come back to the first bass note. So right there I was always hitting the second and third bass notes the same, where I'm hitting the fourth string in both spots. Or it might happen like this, where I came back to the G in the bass on the third, for the third bass note. As far as the timing goes, is in terms of counting this out in 4/4 time, what's different in this pattern, that as opposed to this type of thing, if I'm keeping a steady alternating bass going like that, all those bass notes are played on the beats, 1, 2, 3, and 4. In this case, if we count out the timing here, that second bass note is on the and of 2. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So what we hear in the bass is this: 1, 2 and 3 and 4. 1, 2 and 3 and 4. And that's the pattern we're going to do as we run through most of the parts to If You Could Read My Mind. So before we look at the tablature really elaborately, let's talk, or really meticulously, I guess. Let's just talk about the chords, because a lot of these chords are really easy, and Gordon plays them, again, as minimally as possible, meaning don't put down fingers on strings you're not going to play. And so our pattern on the G chord would just be that. The second chord in the progression is a G add 9. Now what an add 9 chord means is that you just have the ninth note of the scale added to the three notes that make up the chord. The three notes that make up a G chord are G, B, and D. But the ninth note of G would be the same as the second note of G, which is A. So we're just going to add an A to this chord on the second fret of the G string. And that's the chord. So when you see G add 9 in the chart, so hopefully you guys are looking at the chart rather than the tab for now. This is where we're going to start. And that's the G add 9 chord. You just put your second finger on the A. Then the only thing that changes in the progression is the bass note changes from G to F. Now Gordon plays this with his thumb, so he plays his G add 9 like this, and he's always got his thumb here ready to play the F in the bass. So if you watch videos of this, you'll barely see that he's doing this. See, you can hardly see that my thumb is playing that note. So I'm recommending, you're welcome to do it that way if you want. I generally wouldn't. So I would reach back and for the F with my first finger, and important to leave your second finger on the A while you're doing that. So that's the first two lines. That's the D minor 6, by the way, with F in the bass. So that's this scary looking chord that is the second chord in the chart. It's only two fingers. It's an F on the 6th string and an A on the 3rd string. So what we have is going from G now if you look at the tablature, something that's really interesting about the introduction to this, the A that he adds to make it a G add 9 gets added as the last note of the first measure, not as the first time that string gets hit in the second measure. So we hear this A in the first measure as the very last note. And then when it's coming back, when it's going back and forth between these two chords, the last note the last time is the open G. So the note that changes is always changing on the and of 4. And while I'm bringing that up, in the introduction, if you got the hang of that so far, in the introduction in the tab, and this is the way it appears on the record, the notes are reversed on the G with A on the G add 9, meaning the order of the fingers, instead of being thumb, index, middle, it's middle, index. So the two measures in the intro, The very first two measures in the tab go like this. Oh. I'm having nail problems. So that's the first two measures. Now, and he only uses that pattern when he's not singing. As soon as he starts singing the song, he goes into the forward pattern. I might call the second one kind of the backward pattern because it goes from high to low in terms of the strings.